listener, you're very not welcome to our horrible, vindictive, selfish, spiteful, anti-Valentine, I hate you man special. And today I will be hating, what's your name, sir? You over there, who I hate and despise with all my being.
I'm very hesitant to say anything now. I feel like I'm going to bring vitriol down on me. I'm Ron. I just want to say I love you, listener, and I don't in any way support the music of my counterpart here.
He's not. He's flicking the V's off screen. You can't see it.
Flicking the V's. Is that a Britishism? I've never heard that one. Yeah, I get it what it means, but I've never heard flicking the V's.
Yeah. I guess it's the equivalent of flipping the bird, right?
Flipping the bird, yeah, I guess. Or, yeah. Giving the finger, I guess.
Yes. Anyway, so welcome. No, sorry, not. Fuck off. Go away. Turn this off. But if you insist, then yeah, here's our anti-Valentine special, and the setup here is it's become tradition, I guess. Is each one of us, I'm Clive Davis, by the way, that's Ron Scott. We choose a film.
It's very smooth, very well put in there.
Yeah. Oh, we're doing this for years now. So
this is our 101st episode, I guess, right? So we're got this down to a fine jelly. It's
smooth as diarrhea. Yes, and we choose a film guaranteed to wind up the other person. That's the idea. However, that's a bit too easy, right? So the trick is you have to choose a film that you genuinely like. You have to like it, and you think the other person will not. That's the trick here, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we both take.
But of course, and of course it's a guess, right? So you have to kind of, based on what we know of each other, try to get something that you like, but that you think the other person will hate.
Right. Right. Yes.
Exactly. So like for example, some of the ones we visited in the previous years. Last year, I made the choice of going with an Adam Sandler, the Billy Madison, which I guessed wrong, which you actually quite enjoyed. So
yeah.
But then you also tried to get me to watch. You got me to watch the Enema Bandits in the previous years, and which wasn't that bad. It was a little gross, but I didn't hate it.
Right. No, yeah. It's difficult. It's difficult to land one. I think. But that's fun. Trying.
I think the most that's been landed was me with Van Wilder a few years ago, right? So
that was inhuman.
I still win for that one. So
I still have a scar on my lower abdomen from that one. Yes. Anyway, so yes, I this year I decided to launch first with Possession, which is a 1981 French West German co-production, written and directed by Andrzej Zalewski, a Polish filmmaker, shot in West Berlin, very near the Berlin Wall. And yes, what's this one about? There's a question.
Yeah.
I suppose best way to go around, I'll do a very, very quick kind of plot rundown. So basically our two stars are Sam Neill and Isabella Gianni. Mm-hmm. Sam Neill seems to be a spy, I guess, of some sorts. It's not really spelled out exactly, but he seems to be a spy who's returned from some kind of...
He's like an assassin or something, or some sort of spy or assassin who does some sort of secret work for the government that you're not really sure. Right. It's not really supposed to know, but obviously to do something to do with violence, I guess, which comes back at the end, I guess, right?
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about the fact that he might be an assassin.
Well, because that was what again, spoilers, of course, everyone.
Oh yeah, spoilers all the way.
at the end, the people who were trying to get him to stay on and work for him tried, like, basically kill him, right? So it's the same people, right? I'm correct with that, right?
I think they try and get him to come back to work for them. I don't know.
But then he doesn't. But then they end up killing him, right? So
I think it's the police that kills him. I think it's
or at least they're trying to kill him. They're. I mean, they shoot at him, right?
Yeah, it's difficult to tell. At that point, it's very murky what's going on at all.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, it's something shady and under the boards, right? You know, it's not a. He's not like a businessman or a banker or something. It's something he doesn't. That's not meant to be clear that he.
Yes,
he doesn't do.
And I think it's important that it's on the border there. Right, that it's Although
I to be honest, I wasn't sure what the significance of that was, other than the climax when he's running from all the people, because it just did it really matter what his job was? Did you find that?
Well, I don't know. I suppose it depends on what you think
of the movie, I guess.
Of what Zalowski is or isn't trying to, because it's not a film with a very definite message exactly,
right? Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because it's deliberately obfuscated and it's there, or if it's more just, you take from it what you bring to it,
right?
But there's certainly something I've heard Zalowski talk about it a little bit. There's something about, like, he said something along the lines of, like, this was as near, putting this on the border, it was kind of like as near to that communist world as you could get and still make the film that you wanted to make.
Right.
And it's clearly something to do with the larger whatever he's trying to get to. It's clearly part of it. There's a political dimension.
Right.
But then again, it's personal as political and political as personal, and it's a hell of an untangling job, I think, if you were kind of foolish enough in a way to demand I want to know what this is about, like, tell me.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
If anyone could do it. But anyway, so he returns to his wife, as played by the incredibly beautiful Isabella Gianni, it has to be said. And they also have a son. They have a little boy. And it's slowly kind of turns out that, so she's not that pleased that he's back, right? She's something's happened to her in the interim, and she insists at first it isn't another man. She doesn't have another lover, but then he kind of badgers and she breaks down. She admits, yes, I do have a lover, who turns out to be this German guy played by Heinz Bennett. And their marriage basically falls apart, right? It disintegrates, right. It falls apart. And it turns out, but it's not just the fact that she has this other lover, because the other lover seems to be very confused about what's going on. Like, when he assumes she's with him, she's not. She's somewhere else again, right? And then it turns out she has another secret apartment, which he assumes is where she meets this lover. But then it turns out, again, spoilers, go watch the film, come back if the lover is octopus.
It's not like a straight up octopus. I think it's meant to be some sort of like a squid-like creature that is slowly, again, further spoilers, slowly transforming into Sam Neill's clone.
Right.
Yeah, right. So, but you don't know that to the end. But you see at the beginning, it's like this sort of like shadowy, kind of like tentacly kind of creature that's got that's very properly kind of gross and whatever. But she makes love to this thing, right? So,
designed by Carlo Rambaldi, the effects guy who did the '76 King Kong, and yes, and there's a scene, the first time you see it probably having sex with Ajani, it kind of looks like that famous Hokusai painting, right? The dream of the fisherman's wife, when there's like an octopus going down on her. It kind of looks like a direct reference to that painting. And yeah, and then it really goes off the rails, right? And then it's like,
then it goes up. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. One of the main reasons, and I'll get to this, why I chose this as a film that might potentially get on. There's two things. One is, I think you don't like to be in the dark too much, right? Like a certain above a certain level of ambiguity can rub you the wrong way, right?
Right. Okay.
Plus, I was thinking about the
subway scene,
heightened performances, the shrill shouting matches.
Yes,
which I admit weren't quite as loud and endless I remembered them being, but then again, I thought if coming into it for the first time, I'm sure they had that effect.
Right, yeah. Okay, I was right, because as I was watching the movie, I was like, why would he choose this movie particularly? Of all the movies, I mean, of course, I have lots of Achilles heel. I mean, you could have just chose any porn, and I would have been like, oh, come on, yes. Right? So, but yeah, so I was like, why? What's that?
That's too easy, isn't it?
That's what I thought. It would be too easy. So yeah. I appreciate you making the effort to try to think outside the box. And I was saying like, oh, I bet you it's because he thinks that it's too ambiguous and that he thinks that the acting's too bad, right? So
right.
So I guess
I pitched at a level which I could imagine you like cringing and like turning the volume down or like yeah. So that was the idea. Yes, so and then it gets into
because I'm an angry old man. Yeah,
and then it gets into all sorts of strange, and then it turns into like it's who knows what's going on? Is the craziness spreading? Is it some kind of psychic disease? Mm-hmm. Both Ajani and Neil end up murdering people, and then there's like shootouts and like a bit of a car chase, and and then clones, and Ajani has her own clone, right? There's a school teacher.
Is it a clone? Yeah. So I mean, the idea is that his is supposed to be an actual clone that was grown from this squid creature, but hers is just their kid's teacher just happens to look exactly like her, except with different eye color. So,
or it is her because,
or it isn't, or it is her.
It is her, right?
Or it's just his imagination that it looks like her because she's says, "Oh yeah, I see your wife every day." And there's, of course, no mention of the fact that we look exactly alike. So maybe it's just something that he's just gone crazy and imagines that it's her, Yeah. I mean, so
yes. Or she's like the other thing I've read is that she's like the idealized, non-problematic wife.
Right. Just like his clone is an idealized, non-problematic version of him, right? So,
she does look good with those green contact lenses, though. Even more yummy than normal Ajani. But yes, so and of course the famous, I suppose the centerpiece, the most famous is this kind of amazing tour de force bit of acting when Ajani goes mental in a subway and seems to have some kind of miscarriage or something, right? She really goes for it. This is the scene everyone seems to remember from this film. Is that
when I saw it, I had no idea that this was like such a famous scene.
Right.
Afterwards, it was like people were talking about the subway scene for Possession, and so it's like a benchmark of something, which I didn't know. I've never heard of it or had it referred to beforehand. So.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to come into it, right? Is just not to know anything really, because because I don't think there's anything that really there's nothing that really sets you up for it in terms of keys to like, get it or something like that, right? It's still all really nicely shot by Bruno Newton as well. This kind of steady cam work, but like the location works amazing. There's like that scene where he's on the motorbike and stuff. It's really, really nicely done, right? Really, really well shot.
The one shot that actually really stuck with me, it seems like not a very important or prevalent shot, but it's when Sam Neill is in the rocking chair.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know, for some reason that shot really stuck with me, where he's like doing these, like, not just like little rocks, but these gigantic rocks, with these like crazy eyes, and you're just like, he keeps going in and out of frame, like rocking back and forth. You know, you see his eyes and he comes back and he's just like his anger, his emotion or his anger, expressed through this like crazy rocking.
Right.
That was
right.
Very funny.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that both Ajani and Neil have commented, over the years, like, this was a film, like, they're both kind of quite proud of it, but they both kind of say something along the lines of, you have to be young to do it.
Yeah, and also it was traumatic for both of them to film it, right? So that they took them like it says, like Isabella Johnny said, that took her like years to get over it, or like just the filming area. So
right, because it is exhausting just to watch them, and there's like they have like one argument that trashes a restaurant, right? Basically, it just smashes a restaurant.
Yeah, she's like, oh no, I don't love you anymore. We're gonna break up. No, you have to say it. No. She just gets away. You just start throwing tables around.
yeah. I have to admit, I mean, it's difficult material to work with, I think. So props to both of them. I think Isabella Gianni does a slightly better job of like really sinking into her role. I mean,
right.
She has that mix that I really go for, cute and psychopathic. When I was young,
but I think she had an easier job. I mean, not necessarily in terms of but in terms of that type of thing, because her character in the movie is supposed to be mysterious. Like, you're not really supposed to know what her motivations are, or what is happening with her. And so her like switching on a dime between like really weird and crazy behavior is more understandable, because that's kind of what she's doing. But Sam Neill is supposed to be our straight man. He's supposed to be sort of like the character that we're experiencing her craziness through, right? And I guess the idea is that you're supposed to have some sympathy for him, even though he's not that much of a sympathetic character. But I think you're supposed to kind of like, be like frustrated with him as to why she's not like communicating or explaining. But he just sort of like, his sort of like weird, switches in behavior just sort of come out of the blue and don't seem to have any rationale for it, which I think is probably why he has a bit of a harder sell, because there
are certain points where you're not quite, he seems a little out of his depth, like he doesn't quite know why he's doing what he's doing. Like, the energy is there, but not necessarily a motivation behind it.
Yeah. So, and so if there's no motivation for her, it's okay, because that's part of the character. But with him, you feel like you want to see his motivation, right? So
hers feels more of a piece, doesn't it? Like, she never really breaks character. Like, it all seems very like someone slowly going mad, right? Whereas Daniel flips between sort of rational and losing his mind, and
sometimes in the same scene, like he'll be like totally like the total rational straight person. This is our viewpiece into the we were seeing this story through his eyes, and then suddenly he's just like this like crazy person, absolutely like just on a dime, right? So it's I think he had a harder job of that, because I think it was harder to buy into that sometimes, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he does have the harder job, and I don't think it necessarily because everything's so bewildering about this film. I think it does. He certainly doesn't bring the film down at all.
No, I wouldn't say so. Yeah, but
you don't quite know where you are anyway, and it's such a kind of propulsive story in a way. Like, it doesn't stick around for long. I think some people, because it's a long film, it's like 124 minutes, and I think sometimes people's image of a long kind of difficult kind of art housey film is it's going to have a slow pace to it, and I think that's one thing you can't. You may not like it, but you certainly can't accuse this film of not just moving barreling ahead right from the beginning.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
What the fuck? What? Oh, what now? Like, even if you don't like it, I don't think many people would necessarily be bored with it, just because there's no real room to be bored, right? It would be more bewildered than bored, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway, Ron, what did you think of?
Before I also wanted to mention that I thought tonally, I don't know if you agree with me or not. It also kind of reminded me a little bit of The Tenant, in some ways, just like in certain. Sorry.
Also with Isabella Gianni.
Also with Gianni, but it just sort of in terms of like the sort of like this creeping and dread and the sort of like feeling of, very strange what's happening, but something bad is happening, but you're not sure what it is that's happening, and you're like, there's a creature in her bedroom versus there's a tooth in the wall. You know what I mean? Like there's this sort of like, so it kind of reminded me a little bit of that in terms of
right. I would say Tenant is slightly closer to a kind of a more conventional film in a way, like the way it's set up, like it
yes, yeah. So
it's like Hitchcock on acid or something like that. Like it's
right, yeah.
Whereas this seemed a lot as if it had less, that it was less attached to a more familiar filmmaking structure or story or narrative structure.
Right. And the other thing it kind of reminded me of tonally was what was the other movie we did, the Jake Gyllenhaal one with he saw his with the spider. Enemy, yeah. So a little bit reminded me a little bit of Enemy too, like just like the uncompromising in its unwillingness to share what the story is supposed to be. Like it's sort of like, this is what you got, and you can take what you get from it, and you take what you don't get from it, and it doesn't matter to the filmmakers, one way or the other, right? So it's
so if you wanted to program a cinema of ambiguity season, yes, Enemy and Obsession would both be.
I guess but to I mean, I wouldn't say I loved this movie.
Okay.
But I don't think I'd put it in like I hated it either.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I have to disappoint you again this year. Because I mean, like there was parts which I was quite involved with it and really interested in, especially because I'm and as you know, I'm a big fan of horror generally, and I like horror movies in general. So choosing a horror movie I thought was a bold choice for you, because I mean, there's more horror movies that I like that I don't like, right? So even if I don't like the movie itself or the performances, there's still something I find to like in most horror movies, right? So and same with this one.
I suppose I don't really think of it as a genre. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that as one of those snobs who's like, oh, this isn't horror, because I have a lot of respect for horror. I'm certainly not one of those people who feels the need to defend a love of horror, right? But I genuinely don't, like, when I think back on it, I just think of it as like, it's almost like uncategorizable, really. Like, I guess doesn't really fit in a category, right?
But I think my difficulty to deal with ambiguity is sort of specific to I don't know, I'm not sure if I can even explain this well enough, but to a specific kind of ambiguity. I don't think the ambiguity in this movie is like frustrating ambiguity. I think it's sort of like it's more of there's a very fine line between ambiguity that keeps you interested and wondering and thinking about it afterwards, versus the ambiguity that's like, what the fuck is happening? What is this? What is this nonsense, right? So I think this is kind of falls a little bit more on the other side, which is that it was like, whoa, what is this creature? Like, why are they clones? What's happening? What's going on here? And it kept me. I was engaged throughout the whole movie. Well, at some points I was kind of like what the fuck is happening? But it wasn't to the point where I ever felt angry about it, I don't think, right? So
did you like the film?
I liked parts of it. I thought, as I said, I thought it was well shot, as you said. Some of the yes, sometimes the performances get a little shrill. I agree. And the subway scene, the famous subway scene, I didn't find it I actually laughed out loud when I watched it. I thought it was quite ridiculous, actually. I thought, and the fact that I'm finding out afterwards that it was like a really like a famous like tour de force, considered like a real like a performance that took her years to get over. I was kind of like, really? Like, it's just like, like I was imagining if I was going to do I was going to do my own version of it today, but I'll save everyone.
I'll put it on YouTube. I want to see.
I don't think what she was doing was particularly difficult, actually. I think she was just sort of breathing heavy and going like clawing at herself. But I don't think it was a particularly
I agree with you.
difficult acting choice. I don't think so.
I didn't think she just fucking repainted the Sistine Chapel or something. It's
just
the scene in it, just where it comes and everything. It's an arresting scene.
Yes, it does. Yeah, but it's a little bit too long.
I don't think ridiculous is necessarily a demerit.
Bad thing. No, it's not a bad thing. Yeah. But I was wondering if I wasn't getting it correctly, because I don't think people generally view that scene as ridiculous. I think they generally see it like, wow, like golf clap, with your acting chops, right? But I didn't see it that way. Yeah.
I spilled my cappuccino. That scene was so amazing.
But it was just it went on a little bit too long. I was like, okay, she's breathing, she's having something wrong. I wish it was maybe 30 seconds or 2 minutes short or whatever, but it just kept going on and on. And it just sort of like, okay, then it sort of ends with the miscarriage or whatever, which was a good way to end it, I guess, whatever. But yeah, I don't know. There's a couple of parts where I was kind of like, I was so amused by it that I probably unintentionally so that I laughed out loud, and I don't think that was probably what Zulawski would have wanted. I'm surely, but I did think some parts were ridiculous enough, and I don't think that necessarily means that I disliked it. I just maybe I didn't appreciate the way it was intended to be. But
I have the same feeling. I mean, there are certain scenes. There's suddenly the screaming matches scenes. They're so like over the top. I found myself laughing as well. I don't think that's necessarily detracts from it. I think it's in a way like in real. If you saw anyone really arguing like that in real life in the street or something, there'd be a part of you that would find it amusing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
I'm not sure if Zulawski would appreciate being laughed at, the movie being laughed at, but I feel like he took it a little too seriously to think of it as a comedy. So
yeah, I mean, I've seen a few of these other things, and there's something to that. Like, but then again, I think there's a certain type of cinema as well that kind of the end result almost demands that the person in charge takes it too seriously, because if they didn't, then it would devolve into something. It wouldn't reach those heights because there's no one to drive it.
Right.
The ends justify the means kind of thing. Like if you're aware of how ridiculous something is, you're going to undercut it in the making of it, right? So I'm glad in a way that he did take it to the point where it is, because then you can enjoy it for what it is. Once the job is done, it's there, it exists, and then you can laugh at it if you want to, or you can do this or you can do that. And I was quite struck watching this again, actually. It held up really well. I remember seeing this years ago and being quite impressed by it and bewildered by it. And this time as well, I have to admit as well, I thought, this is it's quite a unique proposition, right? I can't think of anything else quite like Possession.
Right. Yeah.
It's a memorable film, right? I think.
How many times have you seen it now? Was this your second time or?
Second or third, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And how long has it been since you saw it the first time?
The first time I saw it was about 20 years ago, I think.
Okay. And so did it hold up? Was there parts that you sort of like, oh, that wasn't quite what I remembered, or that's better than I remembered, or?
A lot of it, oddly enough, I didn't quite recall just how confusing it was. For some reason in my memory, I don't remember it being a confusing film or a film that I left with lots of questions unanswered. For some reason, I didn't remember that aspect of it. I don't know if that's because I thought I understood it or something back in the day.
But isn't that why you chose it for me?
Yeah, yes, I suppose there was an element of that, but I didn't realize it was quite like, I had the feeling it was a bit more like, it was a bit more like it did reach a sort of, not to conclude, but I didn't realize quite how out there it was in terms of, like, for instance, Enemy, for example, which is a good example of something that we talked about, how you don't really understand it, but it plays more like a dream almost. And
right, yeah.
But in the case of that, that was closer to, let's say, for instance, Eraserhead territory, where I don't think anyone ever tries to figure out Eraserhead, like, because it's so plays out like a dream, right? Where Possession feels like something else. Like, it feels as if it might actually be about something, but I don't really know. Do you know what I mean?
Don't know what that is, though. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels more as if there might, like we were talking in the case of Enemy, like we were saying, well, I wouldn't be surprised if there was no real, it was just images and things that, Whereas in the case of Possession, I feel a little bit more as if a certain thought had gone into it, where there was a way to deconstruct it, but it doesn't really matter. You don't need that. But I think that might be there if you really wanted it to be there.
Yeah. On that point, I think, again, as you said, it was personal, but also political at the same time. And, having not lived in, a communist country, I can't really, connect or understand necessarily where it was the place where it was coming from. Right? So, but I did get that was an element in it. And so the fact that I had no connection to the basis, I felt like it was almost the ambiguity was something that was meant for other people. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like it's sort of because I don't really understand the inner workings of living in a communist country, I feel like there's comment there that was meant for people who have done that, of which I'm not one of them. So it's almost like I didn't understand that part of it, but it almost felt like that doesn't matter because it wasn't meant for me to understand. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
right. I mean, it's interesting because Zulawski was someone who did have a lot of trouble with the authorities just before he made Possession, he started to make this science fiction film called On the Silver Globe, and it got shut down, and then it eventually got finished about 10 years later. That's a very strange, bewildering, epic film as well. Worth seeing, if for nothing else. You remember that famous scene in Cannibal Holocaust with the woman impaled on a...
yeah.
There's a scene on the Silver Globe which has several people impaled in that way, but on poles that are way up in the air.
Oh, really?
And it's like, how the fuck did they do that? It's like Cannibal Holocaust, times 100. Like, how the hell did they pull off that scene? But so and other films as well. So he was, so you always feel as if it became so normal for him to the art he was trying to make couldn't be done in any way. It was always, he talks about masks and things, right? That he almost, like, that was his mode of filmmaking in a way, for things to always be veiled and hidden. And you're wondering at a certain point, like, he's almost forgotten how to do something in a more straightforward manner, right? It's all about codes and masks and illusions and stand-ins and ciphers, and that becomes a filmmaking style in a way. And like you said, if you're not necessarily tuned in to that, it can be a little bit bewildering and make you think, am I, do I need to buy a code book or go to meeting or something?
But at the same time, it was sort of like, this is coming from someone who's lived in a communist country in the late, talking about in the late 70s, early 80s, and pre-Berlin Wall coming down, that kind of stuff, right? That this is like talking about that type of stuff, and also being about his personal journey of being divorced. I guess it's relatively biographical, autobiographical, I guess, right? So to some degree, right? So about him and his actual divorce deteriorating, all kind of mixing together, all being stuff that I have no personal connection with. So
right.
I felt it a very personal movie about him and his issues and the things that it was almost like his therapy that he was doing.
Yeah.
And it didn't bother me that I didn't always get everything, because I felt like it was him working through something, you know what I mean?
Yes,
and good for him, you know what I mean?
It doesn't feel dishonest, right? It feels like it's coming from the heart, right? And yes, I suppose your audience is the perfect Venn diagram of someone who has grown up in a communist country, likes experimental cinema, and is going through a divorce.
Yes.
Yeah. Or in other words, Zwolski.
Yeah, exactly him.
Yeah. Yes, but it is. It's weird. It's kind of like it's like a political horror version of Kramer versus Kramer and David Cronenberg's The Brood, or it's like a
peculiar
mix. But to be honest, I'm glad you seem to have kind of got something out of it, which is actually
I certainly wasn't. I certainly was never like, oh my god, this. Yeah, it was like it was an interesting watch. Afterwards, you know, and I thought I was still thinking about it afterwards, right? So it definitely stayed with me, which I guess was the point, right?
Yes.
And I mean, I wouldn't say it was. I wouldn't say it's on my top 100 movies of all time. I mean, I didn't like love it, but I certainly didn't hate it. So it was So it was.
Do you think you'd take another run in it one day when you're a bit older?
Maybe one day, maybe if I have some time, I'd give it another shot. I feel like it's probably in that category of you get more out of it from a second viewing too, as well, right? So I think one of these days maybe now that I know what to expect, I can kind of like look at it more from a critical eye and so that. So this one I was just sort of like it was almost like I was going in because of how this was presented to me and chosen for this particular Valentine's Day special. I was almost like tiptoeing at it, like with like trepidation, like what am I in for here? You know what I mean? So
this was a Video Nasty. There's another film that we've done that was Video Nasty in the UK back in the day. And also worth noting, I mean, I've never seen this version, and I'm slightly curious because I'm wondering how it plays. I think when it was first released in the United States, it basically had a third of its running time cut.
Oh yeah,
80 minutes long. I can't imagine, like, even if you took against this film or thought like, oh, some of these scenes, like you said, the scene in the subway might be a little bit long, and even if you were to make trims, I can't imagine taking 40 minutes out of this film. Like, So I'm I don't know if it's still around. I don't know if there's an extra on the Blu-ray or something, but I'd kind of be interested to see the Cliff Notes version of this.
Do you think they took out like all like the creature stuff, or do you think that was stuff kept in there?
No, my guess is that's probably some of the more commercial stuff in a way, isn't it?
But, right.
Yeah, I'm guessing maybe a lot of the kind of domestic
violence stuff.
Yeah, but then if you take that out, it's like, well, I just can't imagine where you'd start unless they did just take snippets from here and there, or
right. Couple lines here, couple lines there.
But it has reignited my love affair with Isabella Gianni as well. I have to say.
Okay, that did not The Tenant.
Oh no, I mean she's stunning in this film. I think both incarnations of and plus as well, it is a kind of slightly hypnotic performance as well.
Right.
So no, she's a great screen presence, I think.
Is she still working? Is she still?
Yeah. She's still knocking about. Yeah. So there we go. That's. I'm just looking quickly over my notes. Oh, there was one scene that reminded me of the scene where she's looking at, the crucified Jesus.
Oh yeah.
She's just kind of like sobbing to herself a little bit and kind of wailing slightly. It did put me in mind a little bit of that scene in Bad Lieutenant when Harvey Keitel has one of his famous naked sobbing scenes in front of Jesus, and it's almost like that scene made explicit, right? Like when he's screaming, like "Where were you? Where the fuck were you?" and all that. It's almost as if it's like what Ajani's thinking, but kind of made explicit. I was wondering if this was an influence on, because I'm sure Abel Ferrara would have seen Possession. Right. It was very much in his wheelhouse, I think. So
right.
I'm wondering if it was a conscious or a subconscious thought, because it just reminded me of that scene. Badly done. Yeah, well, that's me then. On how about you, Ron?
Okay. Yeah, it was good. Well, yeah, I mean, sorry to disappoint you about the hated, but it was. No,
to be honest, I'm less disappointed that I ruined your day, and I'm more actually pleased that you kind of got something out of Possession, because secretly that's what I was hoping for, really.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and so good. No, okay. Good.
Okay.
But I'll keep up the pretense just for the hilarity. Grrr, curses, etc.
Right.
What have you got for me?
Okay, so to turn the tables,
sorry to spoil as well, but yeah, Ron wins.
I knew it. Yeah, so I was pretty confident that I got a good one this time. So I don't know. I was like I almost spend the entire year trying to come up with the perfect movie, because it's really difficult to really guess what you don't like, because you like some real shit. Right? So it's really hard to really guess what you really don't like. But I think I'm starting to zero in on the things that really get your goat. So this time I was sort of like, I mean, movies aside, you are a self-professed music snob, right? So yeah, so I thought maybe I'd come at it from that angle this time, and so and
you wily devil, you.
So myself being a longtime alternative rock fan, I thought, oh, I'm sure that's going to get him. Right. So I thought, okay, so the movie that popped in my head, I was like, for some reason that just feels like the best movie to choose was the 92 Cameron Crowe flick Singles.
Yeah.
Starring Bridget Fonda, Campbell Scott, Kira Sedgwick, and Matt Dillon, Bill Pullman, and James LaGrosse, and all those other 90s stars, and some cameos by Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam and Chris Cornell from Soundgarden. It was great. So anyway, this is sort of a basic summary, I guess. This one is just, it's basically like a rom-com.
Can I just check in with you there on just to
Yeah.
double check before you continue, just to check you're not cheating.
Yeah.
This is
No, I love this movie.
Are you still? You had fond memories, and
I still love this movie. I still love it.
I can't believe we're friends, Ron. It's just amazing.
And I knew you were gonna ask that, so I was like, that this movie was pure nostalgia for me. I actually still like my speaking of going at the movie for a second, at the music part of it. So I have lived in Japan now for 17 years, and I haven't heard a single new song in that time. Like I've never, I don't listen to the radio anymore. I don't like, I used to listen to radio all the time when I lived in Canada or whatever. So I have no exposure to new music ever at all anymore. The only ever new music I ever hear now are bands that I already liked from 20 years ago that are still around and happen to put out new albums. So basically, my playlist that if and when I listen to music these days, which is becoming increasingly less, it involves basically music that I've had since I was in high school, basically, right? And the 90s, like the early between 90 to 96-ish was sort of like my formative years in terms of music, where it was like music became the most important thing in my life was the 90s.
Right. Me too.
Yeah.
I think we were just listening to different things. That's the only.
Yeah. So I was fully into the grunge rock, the Seattle scene, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Nirvana, and I wore plaid flannels to school, and and the black jeans and the Metallica t-shirts and stuff. That was my high school. Which
you would have been the guy stumbling over to put your arm around Alicia Silverstone in Clueless, who goes as if. And then, right.
Yeah, exactly. And this connects back to last episode, our last Magic Morning Wood episode, where I talked about how I had no friends, right? So there's a direct connection here, right? Right. So so this is my best friend in high school, I met because we both had Guns N' Roses t-shirts on. Yeah, so like that was
right.
Yeah. So that was
I liked Guns N' Roses for a while. I have to admit.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, what I mean is that actually the single soundtrack was actually like one of my go-to like cassette tapes that I used to use all the time, and is to this day still on my. If I just do a shuffle, is still mixed in there. It's still like on.
What's actually on it? I don't think I've ever heard the singles soundtrack. I'm guessing there might be one or two good things on it, but what?
There's Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Mother Love Bone.
That's the point of this film. That's the point of this film that really got to me. It was very near the beginning. There's like a pan across graffiti on a wall, and it's Mother Love
Bone. Yeah,
and it was just such a, you think that's cool? Do you think that's cool? And pre-Pearl Jam and fuck you movie, just fuck you. I was very.
And Smashing Pumpkins, Mudhoney, Paul Westerberg.
I liked Mudhoney.
Mudhoney was on there. There was a Jimi Hendrix song on there, which was a little different. Screaming Trees, anyway, so those types of which was really just right in my like, and I've always had this sort of, I mean for myself, I'm sure everybody else listens to music and continues to have their interest in music or their music sort of tastes evolve throughout their lifetime. Right. But I find, generally speaking, a lot of people kind of find when they sort of peak and music becomes a big part of their life, it almost gets stuck there to the point where, where even though you can find new bands and like new things, you always come back to this one period of your life of music nostalgia, which never goes away. I think that's.
You have to push yourself to. I still listen to a lot of new stuff that new and new to me. Stuff that I go back and listen to old blues and records that I've never heard before and stuff. But no, even I tend to think I have quite a wide range of music that I listen to. But yeah, even for me, there are certain things, and they do tend to be from that era that that's probably like the most joyous I can get. It's the perfect mixture of nostalgia and everything that I doubt I'll ever hear anything that will surpass that stuff as like my absolute favorite, even if
Exactly.
I like.
Yeah. So it's music that might be 50 years old, or you might have liked it when you were 10 years old, but it's so entrenched. Like, and music is even more so than movies and TV shows. Like, music is really connected to the emotional parts of your brain, and you hear a song and you're immediately transported to that time of your life. So it's sort of like, and you can never unlike it. You know what I mean? No matter So
I think the only thing that might be as deep as a hook is, and this is rarer because you almost can't control it, is occasionally there's a smell. I don't know if you have you're walking down the street and there's a smell and it hits you and it takes you right back to your childhood brain, and you don't even know what it is or where you smelled it before, or even when you're smelling it now. But whenever that happens to me, whenever I'm walking down the street, even if I'm late for something, I try and backtrack a few steps and take as much of it in as I can.
It's
such a clarity. You're like your childhood brain, and then the smell's gone and the feeling's gone. But it's
So I mean, like early '90s Seattle grunge is that period for me. Like, that was where, like, I became a person. I became aware of music. I was coming into myself and learning about myself and making my own choices, not what I was learning from some other people. You know what I mean? So that stuff will never go away from me, despite the fact that it's so out of fashion and it's become almost a joke in itself now to many people. But it's just sort of like, it'll always be a happy place for me. You know what I mean? So it'll always be like a place I go. Right. So
I'll try my best not to trample over your happy place.
No, feel free. I mean, that was why I chose it, right? Because I knew you would. So, but the point is that so that's the music. So the soundtrack became actually, this was one of my all-time favorite soundtracks to a movie that I just sort of like became. There's a few movies that where the soundtrack almost became bigger than the movie itself to me, when this is one of them, right? So this is probably the first one that ever happened to me with. And so not only that, but then of course I'd seen the movie several times, and just the feeling of the movie was almost just transports me back to that time. You know what I mean? It's just a movie, and I mean, it's an okay movie. I mean, it's just a rom-com basically. It's Cameron Crowe in the '90s, in his musings on love, and there's different vignettes and different people living in the building, and it's how they deal with love, and just like it's sort of like all mixing together, and like their storylines kind of diverging.
I tell you exactly what it is, Ron. I managed to encapsulate it in 3 words. It's a hipster Friends.
A hipster friend, and interestingly enough, you mentioned that, I didn't know this when I was researching the movie after we watched it again, that apparently Friends was originally meant to be a TV version of this movie.
That makes a lot of sense. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that until actually until like last week when I looked it up. And apparently that they talked to Cameron Crowe about optioning this movie to make it into a TV show, and he turned it down. He said no. But I guess the studio optioned it out, and he found out about it like in the trade papers or something, saying like, oh, well, there's going to be a singles TV show now. And he's like, what? And so he apparently tried to fight it and didn't want it to happen. And then they changed it just enough to get through like the legal issues and whatever from Cameron Crowe, and they changed it to Friends, and that's what that became Friends. And apparently Friends
makes perfect sense.
And there is, and even Cameron Crowe can say like that he's a little bit proud that you can see like almost a straight line between this movie and Friends, right?
No, he's gone down in my opinion again.
Did you? Right, I never really thought of you having a particularly high opinion of Cameron Crowe anyway.
Well, I mean, he wrote Fast Times at Ridgemont High, right? Which is
right. Okay.
And I haven't seen it in a long time, but I always, I like to Say Anything, which he also wrote, as well, right? With John. I thought that was a little bit close. I mean, I do have, I'm not a total stone heart, I'm not a anti rom-com guy or anything like that. But Say Anything was, for whatever reason, I remember being more favorable towards that. I think it also helps that was back in the day when John Cusack was a very likable screen presence, right? What happened to John Cusack along the way.
Well, you got old, right? So
well, not just that. Doesn't he have ever slightly strange political views and stuff? There's been some.
Oh, does he? I don't really know much about him as a person. So
yeah, but no, I always kind of see he seemed to be interesting. Actually, John Cusack is the opposite of someone who's in this movie. So John Cusack's one of those people who used to be, oh, John Cusack's in this. That might be interesting in that case. And he's the opposite of poor old James LaGrosse. James LaGrosse, I think, in retrospect, is the original Giovanni Ribisi.
Really?
As he's no, it's true. I'm not trying to be mean with him.
I feel bad for you. I like James LaGrosse.
No, I don't mind Giovanni Ribisi, and I like James LaGrosse. But I just it fell into that weird pattern where there'd be a movie that had a quirky or interesting, offbeat sounding nature. You'd look at the cast list and your heart would sink because James LaGrosse is in it. Not because I don't like James LaGrosse, but just going by evidence, every time James LaGrosse was in something, it always... Another one, actually, was another guy who turned up in interesting sounding movies and then they failed to be as interesting. Randy Quaid was another one.
Oh, Randy Quaid, yeah.
So I'd be like, James, and then, this sounds good. Giovanni Ribisi. It's not their fault. I don't dislike them, but somehow they have a knack of turning up in films that are almost good. If you see what I mean.
But Randy Quaid is amazing in Christmas Vacation, though. So that's because Eddie.
Well, I'm not a vacation guy, but yeah.
Right. But I think I first saw James LaGrosse in, was he in like Living in Oblivion? Was he in that movie?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember him really liking him in that. So that's sort of, I think you gotta you have to see him in something you really like him to sort of like keep it in your head, right? So
no, I think I liked him in. Wasn't he in? What was that film called? My New Gun. I think he was. No, My New Gun. That's a different film. Love in a 45. Isn't he in that?
Oh, okay.
I remember liking 11 to 45 when it was new. I mean, I don't know how it would hold up now, but that's another very 90s film, right?
Right, yeah. So, but anyway, poor late James LaGrosse. I mean, but like my image of James LaGrosse was that in the 90s he was almost like a kind of like a sex symbol, because I think I remember him being sort of compared to Brad Pitt back in the day, and then they kind of went diverged where Brad Pitt stayed sexy and James LaGrosse kind of became this just strange old man kind of, right? So
well, he's also in Drugstore Cowboy, which is another film.
Yes,
I like.
Right. Yeah.
I really enjoy. So it's not. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but yeah, he's in Ribisi territory.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, I also like I also just going back to like nostalgia. I mean, I remember just being right in the of course this was height of Wank Bank, right? This was height of Bridget Fonda being in my Wank Bank, right? So Bridget Fonda was so she was right. She was cute.
She said in this film. It's interesting as well. I was thinking another person I hadn't thought about in years is like one of the leads, Campbell Scott, right? And I looked him up because I was wondering, did he retire anything? And then I looked him up and no, he's been working steadily. It's for whatever reason I just haven't seen anything with Campbell Scott in years. So I was like, oh, Campbell Scott, yeah. He's a very 90s presence as well. Like he's got that slight kind of earnest stroke boring kind of thing. Like, you wouldn't have him in a lead in a film now, I don't think.
No, probably.
You'd have Paul Rudd or something in his role.
Yeah. I mean, he basically is the Paul Rudd of the early 90s, right? So I mean,
but less funny.
But less funny and less attractive and less sort of like likable. I guess. Yeah. He's like a bland poor man's Paul Rudd, I guess.
Yeah. And again, nothing against him. I suppose he gives a good enough performance for what it is. But it just seems very, very dated. His role in it just seemed very dated, even more than. And the other thing as well was I remember this movie being a lot more specifically about the Seattle music scene. I know there's a lot of Seattle in it, but there was less than I remembered. I mean, they go to gigs, I don't know, twice, and fucking Alice in Chains are on. And there's that, and like a few people wear like Sub Pop t-shirts, or there's Sub Pop posters. And again, I remember Sub Pop a lot of this music, I don't think would have been on Sub Pop, right? Like Sub Pop were a more properly indie kind of label with.
Yeah, well, they started Nirvana and stuff, right? So yeah.
Right, but a lot of these other fuckers, they went straight to the majors, like Geffen and stuff, like Pearl Jam and people
Right.
like that, right? So that was the other thing. It didn't have, like, if it was more Sub Pop artists, I probably would have enjoyed it. But overall, there isn't actually that much
yeah, well,
Apple music scene in it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that I like, because this movie is so entrenched with the soundtrack for me,
right,
that I remembered it that way too. And I was actually surprised that there wasn't. Of course, there is some, but I remember there being more too. But it wasn't as much as I thought it was. Right. So, but but even to the point where it's giving some, like, gives like Eddie Vedder and like Chris Cornell like acting roles, like like they're like sort of like cameo acting roles or stuff, which is yeah, so it's not as about that as I expected as well. But it's apparently I also read another thing about this movie, was that it was sort of made before that whole Seattle thing exploded. That apparently it was made prior to that, and then that the company, the studio, shelved it because they didn't know what to do with this movie. And then and then the Seattle thing kind of happened. The sort of like the Pearl Jam Nirvana thing happened, and then they released it sort of because of that happened, and then that's sort of why it became popular. Right. But apparently, like, Cameron Crowe was really adamant in saying that it wasn't playing off of the popularity of the music. It was sort of like just happened to be released. It was a coincidence that it was happening at the same time. Right. Or it was the studio's choice to do it. That apparently it wasn't made because of it, but it was released around the same time, right? So whatever.
Right. The other thing I was a little bit surprised was in it was Jim True Frost, right? Who he's the Campbell Scott's friend, who was later in The Wire, particularly in the season set that was focused around the education system of the school, right?
Right.
And
season 2, I think.
Yeah. So I was surprised to see him. I was like, I don't remember, because I wouldn't have known who he was back in the day.
Right.
But now I know him as that guy from The Wire, because The Wire is large for me, because it's a great show. But it was kind of interesting to see him in it.
Right. And did you happen to recognize Eric Stoltz in his role as the mime?
I as soon as he came on, number one, I thought, "Oh, fuck you, film," as if you couldn't get any more annoying. A mime, great. But then when he started speaking, I did recognize he's someone, but I couldn't quite place him. And then I looked it up with his Eric Stoltz. Did you recognize him straight off? I didn't.
I didn't right away. No, I was sort of like, oh, but I know that. And same thing. I was like, I know that's somebody, and I think I looked it up as I was watching. I was like, oh, that's Eric Stoltz, right? Yes.
Right. Another very 90s cameo, right?
Yeah. And also Peter Horton, another 90s cameo from 30 something. I think it was his big thing with that.
I was surprised to see Tom Skerritt turn up in that very small nothing part, because Tom Skerritt was already famous, right? It seemed like a strange, like a favor to the production or a cameo kind of thing.
Yeah. Maybe new Cameron Crowe. But also another notable one was Paul Giamatti's first acting role.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was, I didn't know about that. So that it was like he's
pretty much doing the same thing ever since. As far
So making out with some random girl in the and he goes, "What?" And that was probably his first line on screen. So
right. Jeremy Piven, another very 90s-y face. He's in it as well, right? Being very Jeremy Piven-y.
Also cameo from Tim Burton.
Right. It's funny, when he popped up, I was like, oh, look at that. They found someone who looks like Tim Burton. Because somehow he doesn't quite look like, it's like a more ugly Tim Burton or something. And then, oh, it is Tim Burton. All right. I genuinely was surprised. I thought they got someone who just looked, like, Mongo Burton or something. But no, it is Tim Burton.
And of course, he's the new Martin Scorsese, right? Yeah, so.
That's right. Yeah.
So I don't know, but I guess Tim Burton had made several movies by this point, right? I mean, he wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. He was like a big director by that point. So I assume he just Camera Crow and probably went in as a favor or something.
Right. I mean, 92 is that Batman Returns, maybe. So he would have.
Yeah, I think that was 89. Or yeah, Batman Returns. Yeah. So yeah, it was around the early 90s. Yeah. So it's.
So did you? I mean, I get the nostalgia thing. I certainly get that. But this time watching it, did you laugh? Was it funny?
I laughed at a couple things. I think again, I don't think it's possible for me to objectively criticize this movie just because it was just pure nostalgia. I mean, I just had this sort of goofy grin on my face the whole time I was watching it because it was just sort of like I was just in another place watching this movie, right? It transported me in this movie. Like it's become another time, another place for me. It's such like a what do you call it? It's just like a thing from the 90s. Like it's a time capsule, really. I mean, right.
It's, I suppose it depends whether you enjoyed living in the 90s or not.
Yeah. So, and as I said, I did like the 90s. I didn't like high school, but I did like the 90s. And I did like that kind of scene and that sort of thing. So it was just sort of like brought me back, and it brought me back to it. So it was. I thought the stories were cute, and they had some meet cutes and some interesting I mean it wasn't a great rom-com as opposed to some other ones or whatever, but it was enough to keep me amused for an hour and a half. You know what I mean? So.
Right. So you listened to the soundtrack a lot did you actually rewatch the film a lot as well? Was it a film that you
I couldn't remember, but I must have, because I remembered big swaths of this movie in terms of like even right down to the dialogue in several of the places. So I must have seen it at least. I think I had it on VHS, so I must have seen it at least 4 or 5 times, probably. I'd say probably, but I can't remember exactly. But yeah, definitely there was a lot of love for me for this movie, right? So, and I remember some of my other friends that I used to hang around with at that time also loved this movie, and so we used to discuss it sometimes, or I think we both saw it together, So there's like a connection with it, So.
I think for me, I mean, if I was going to try to be subjective about it, I agree with you in a way. It's not terrible, and it's and it's not great either. It's just as rom-coms go, it's serviceable. I think if the grungy stuff had been removed, I suppose it would be slightly more tolerable for me. It was just having that stuff poke me in the eye every now and again.
but see, and that's why I chose it for you, because I thought that's what I would get it. But for me, that's the thing that makes it stand out, which is that it's the 90s thing that grounds it and gives it like a context. It makes it the time capsule of that time. If it was just a random rom-com without the 90s stuff, without Eddie Vedder and Chris Cornell in it, then it would just be like a totally forgettable. It would be, you wouldn't remember anything about it. But because of that element is why it still sticks out in my mind and still becomes like a thing that I have returned to over the years.
Right.
Now and then, right? So anyway, so I love this movie, and I'll always love this movie no matter what, just because it's sort of it's there in my heart.
this round to you, Ron. Yeah. No, a good.
So what was it that bugged you the most about it, though? So I mean, I'm curious.
I think it's just that whole. I mean, it's like all the worst elements of grunge and that scene as well, I suppose. Like none of the bands I liked, right? Like there wasn't Mudhoney. I suppose Citizen Dick having the song "Touch Me, I'm Dick" is a Mudhoney reference, right? But it wasn't the Mudhoney or like some Nirvana stuff like Meat Puppets, or it was all the shit. It was Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, Pearl Jam. I always hated Pearl Jam.
I knew you did, so that's why.
To be fair, there's what I did like the album they did with Neil Young, Mirror. I did enjoy
Mirrorball,
that. But
in the free world.
I always despised Pearl Jam, and I had a friend who really loved Pearl Jam as well. And yes, going back to the 90s, people who aren't old enough to remember, I mean, it was the flannel invasion for a while, wasn't it? It was everything was about this time and place, and it was so annoying. So to go back to it was like horrible. But yeah, so well played, sir. I don't
So when I thought of it, I was like, oh, I bet you that would really, really bug him, because I bet you he really has like a sore spot about 90s grunge alternative rock and Seattle scene. But then as I got closer to actually announcing it to you, I started to doubt myself. I was like, well, what if he actually likes this movie? What if he actually likes Pearl Jam? I couldn't remember if you did or not. So I started to doubt myself, but I'm glad I went with
How dare you think I might like Pearl Jam? That's most offensive. You could have gone worse. As Cameron Crowe goes, you could have chosen Almost Famous, but I don't know.
You did say it. So versus Almost Famous, do you think this is better or worse?
This is less painful than Almost Famous, I think, because
so I know what to do for next year.
I think Almost Famous tramples over. Like, this is just an example of stuff I didn't like. Almost Famous goes to areas of things that I do like Lester Bangs and stuff like that, and shits all over it. So that's even worse in a way. Plus, isn't it like 5 hours long or something? Or there's a director's cut of it. It felt 5 hours long. I just remember vomiting most of it.
Great. I know exactly what to choose next year.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So there's us done, I think, for this time.
Yeah.
Have a horrible Valentine's Day. I hope
you too.
Chocolate is poisoned.
Go fuck off.
And your dick falls off. Fuck you all. Yeah. Go listen to your fucking Pearl Jam 10. That's enough of that. Until next time.
This was how I broke the best. Indifference, overblown confidence and ignorance. It all made sense. And then I watched them take the test. I believe it's better to inflict than to attempt relief. You ask me what you need. Hate is all you need. Hate is all around. Find it in the heart and every waking sound. On your way to school, work or church, you'll find it. It's the only rule. Build a different world. Hate will help you find what you've been looking for. Hate is everywhere. Inside your mother's heart, and you'll find it there. You ask me what you need. Hate is all you need. This was how I won the West. Charity, a joke that friendly cities think that we believe. So it seems we kicked the ones that stabbed you down. Everyone, a part of my fine actions, I was overcome. You ask me what I've seen. Hate is all I've seen. Hate is in the air. Come on, people, feel it like you just don't care.